So I spent a lot of time in my last relationship going to my ex's family's house for family gatherings, holidays, etc. And the most honest person in the room was always this 5-year-old girl. Watching the way that this family treated this little girl helped me understand how they treat women. She wasn't being disrespectful, she was just telling the truth, and the truth tellers always get punished. So there was this little girl in my ex's family who always got labeled as sassy or difficult, and it was really just her like questioning like, why are the rules different for me? You know, why do I have to do it that way and he doesn't? Or why do I have to go to bed at this time? Just kind of normal kid stuff, asking why, asking for clarification. Not trying to be difficult, not trying to be sassy or talk back or anything like that, but in a really controlling family dynamic, those qualities are often labeled as disrespectful. But I couldn't help but notice, she's just an opinionated little girl and she's really curious and really smart. So she naturally kind of questions things, not in a disrespectful, like challenging authority kind of way. But if a little boy asked the same questions, he would be labeled as opinionated or strong willed or a leader, right? But when a little girl is giving gentle pushback against her parents in a respectful way, she's basically just labeled as being too difficult. At first, I thought it was harmless. They would just call her sassy, in a joking kind of way. But then I started to realize that it was every interaction that they had with her, they were just constantly using this term sassy. And it kind of has a underlying meaning behind it of, you're being really difficult in this situation, you have a bad attitude about things, why aren't you just more agreeable? This girl doesn't just go along to get along, she doesn't go with the flow, she's always asking questions, right? And it was really just her just kind of letting her personality shine and just kind of being an independent thinker, maybe going against the grain a little bit, and really just wanting clarification on, why are the rules the way that they are? And it kind of reminds me of myself growing up, honestly, because I was always the kid to ask why, right? I was really curious. And the answer that my parents would give sometimes would be, because I said so, right? And that to me isn't really a valid answer of like, why do I have to do it this way? Like, why is the rule that way if nobody can actually explain to me why it's a rule, right? It seems kind of silly. So this little girl was just a really independent free thinker and definitely marched to her own drum. And I really respected that about her. But what made me really sad was how the adults in the family didn't really embrace that quality. Instead, they kind of shamed her for it and they wanted to minimize her individuality. She was really just asking questions like, why is this rule different for me? Or why do we have to do it that way? And they just would kind of shut her down and say, just do as you're told, right? So I don't really believe in that parenting method of just teaching kids to just blindly follow authority, because I don't really believe that it sets them up for success in adult life, but that's just me. I also realized that she wasn't really challenging authority, she was more just challenging the inconsistency that she saw. And at 5 years old, she was extremely intelligent, emotionally intelligent, and able to label things and, really calmly articulate her own inner world and how she was feeling better than a lot of adults that I know can. So I think that really speaks to the level of maturity that she had at such a young age to be able to articulate herself so clearly and to be able to explain, how she was feeling. She was feeling frustrated that the rule is this way for her and not for other people, calling out the unfairness, the inconsistencies in the adults in the room. And she wasn't really afraid to speak her mind. I think that a personality trait like that should definitely be recognized and celebrated, because she's confident in herself and she's expressing herself as an individual. And if that were my kid, I would definitely appreciate that characteristic and I would praise it and I would want to see more of it. I think it's a really good quality to be able to advocate for yourself and stand up for yourself. I mean, within reason, granted, she's not being disrespectful or rude, but in my opinion, in these situations, she wasn't being rude. She was basically just asking questions and then not getting a complete answer from the adults in her life. I think that I really connected with this little girl because a lot of what I was seeing in her kind of resonated with how I was feeling growing up. I spent a lot of time in my own childhood questioning things that didn't feel fair, and I really admired her for being able to speak up for herself at such a young age. It was just really tragic that the family had to put her down for that and make it seem like it was a character flaw instead of something to be celebrated. I find that in some families, obedience is valued more than self-expression. And the problem with that is that the children don't learn how to trust themselves when every disagreement is labeled as defiance. And if a child keeps asking the question why, maybe the problem isn't the child, maybe it's that the adults need to have a better answer for them. Were you ever labeled as difficult when you were just trying to understand something that didn't make sense? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching.